Unraveling the Labyrinth, a therapist's journey into the subconscious. Rain danced on the windowpane of my office, painting shifting patterns on the walls glowing under the soft light of my table lamp. The hum of the city's heart was a distant murmur, a barely audible backdrop to the serene calm that cocooned my clinic. The scent of aging books mingled with the aroma of my freshly brewed coffee, creating a soothing atmosphere. It's a sanctuary for my patients, a place that whispered promises of safety and understanding. My name is Theo Lawson, a somnologist and psychotherapist who found himself in the peculiar niche of treating nightmares. I glanced at the young woman sitting across from me. Her name was Lily. She was a graphic designer by day and a tormented dreamer by night. The circles under her eyes spoke volumes about the nights she'd spent in the cruel grasp of terrifying dreams. The hands of the clock hanging on my wall appeared to move in slow motion, marking the passage of time in sync with Lily's soft, shaky voice. She described her recurring nightmare, an inescapable maze, a monstrous entity in pursuit, and the paralyzing fear that seized her when it eventually caught her. She would wake up with the chilling memory of its cold hands on her throat. Each word she uttered painted an eerie scene that lingered in the room. Over the years, I'd listened to numerous tales of fear, each one an intimate revelation of the subconscious mind. But it wasn't the terror that intrigued me, it was the clues hidden within the terror, the messages that nightmares brought from the depths of the unconscious mind. My unconventional methods earned me the moniker Dream Eater among my patients. I'd learned to embrace it over time, wearing it as a badge of honor. I'd developed the skill to dissect nightmares, to rationalize the irrational, and help my patients navigate their nocturnal terrors. As Lily unfolded her dream before me, I leaned back in my chair, fingers pressed thoughtfully against my chin. I met her gaze with an assuring nod, ready to dive into the heart of her nightmare. Little did I know, this case would soon plunge me into depths of the subconscious far beyond anything I'd ever navigated before. "It's always the same," Lily murmured, wringing her hands in her lap, her gaze distant as she plunged back into her dream. "The labyrinth of rooms, the creature chasing me, and the cold touch, it's so real." Listening to her, I felt the familiar pull of curiosity and empathy. Her fear, raw and palpable, filled the room, as if the dream had taken form and slipped in among us. I had built my career around deconstructing such dreams, stripping them of their power to terrify and turning them into mere puzzles to be solved. "Let's unpack this dream, Lily," I said, my tone soothing, my pen poised over my notepad. "You said it begins with a labyrinth. Can you describe it?" She nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. As she began to describe the labyrinth, I noticed her hands stop their nervous movement. She spoke of the high stone walls that rose all around her, the cobwebs that clung to the corners, the musty smell of decay, and the eerie silence that pervaded everything. As I scribbled her words, I couldn't help but marvel at how vivid and detailed her dream was. But there was more to this. My intuition, honed over years of practice, prickled at the back of my mind. I felt an uncanny connection to her dream, as if I had been in that very labyrinth. I brushed off the thought, telling myself it was just a byproduct of my deep involvement with my work. For the rest of the session, we mapped out her dream, our dialogue a dance between reality and the subconscious realm. When she finally left, I was left with an intricate sketch of her nightmare and an unsettling sense of familiarity. The labyrinth, the creature, it felt almost personal. I sat in the quiet, staring at the notes I had taken, the words blurring as my mind was pulled into the mire of uncertainty. Was I merely empathizing too much, or was there something more to this? The question lingered in the air, refusing to be ignored. That night, as I sank into sleep, the world of dreams opened its doors to me. But it was not the peaceful respite I had hoped for. Instead, I found myself standing at the entrance of a labyrinth, a chill running down my spine. I could hear the echo of a monstrous howl in the distance, feel the dread knotting in my stomach. The dream had seeped into my slumber. The nightmare was now mine to live, mine to decipher. The labyrinth was as Lily described it, high stone walls, covered in cobwebs, the air thick with the smell of decay. My heart pounded in my chest as I walked through it, the only sound in the overwhelming silence. I could hear it then, the beast. The sound of its pursuit echoed through the winding paths. The monstrous howl was unlike anything I had ever heard, an unholy sound that made my blood run cold. I ran, my breaths ragged, my mind echoing with Lily's terror. But, despite my fear, there was a part of me, the therapist, that was fascinated. Here was an opportunity to understand Lily's nightmare from the inside. As I rounded a corner, I skidded to a stop. There, at the end of the path, stood a door. It was a striking contrast to the rest of the maze, its polished wooden surface seemingly untouched by the damp decay of the labyrinth. Without thinking, I reached out and pushed it open. The monstrous howl was close now, its echoes vibrating against the stone walls. Inside, the room was filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. Their surfaces were murky with age, yet as I approached one, my reflection became clear. But it wasn't my face that stared back at me, it was Lily's. The image was so startling that I recoiled, stumbling back into the labyrinth. I woke up with a start, my sheets tangled around me, my heart hammering against my ribcage. My skin was slick with a sheen of cold sweat, and I could still feel the echo of the beast's howl in my ears. This was no ordinary dream. I had walked into Lily's nightmare. Daylight brought no clarity, only more questions. I couldn't shake off the dream, the labyrinth, the beast, and the room of mirrors with Lily's face reflecting on the surfaces. It was a puzzle my waking mind grappled to understand. As the sun began to set, I found myself filled with a mix of dread and anticipation. The labyrinth awaited me, as did the beast and the mystery of the mirrored room. As much as it terrified me, I knew I had to dive back into the dream. For myself, for Lily, and for the understanding it promised. This wasn't just about treating Lily anymore, this was a journey into the deepest, darkest corners of the subconscious mind, a journey I had unwittingly signed up for, a journey I had to see through to the end. Night fell again, and I found myself back in the labyrinth. The maze was as foreboding as before, yet now there was an added layer of familiarity. I started moving, my steps echoing against the stone walls. Each corner I turned, every passage I navigated, felt like retracing steps I had already taken, a peculiar déjà vu. The monstrous howl began, slicing through the silence. It filled the labyrinth, a chilling reminder of the nightmare's imminent threat. My heart pounded, fear nipping at my heels. Yet amidst the terror, my therapist's mind took over. I retraced my steps from the previous dream, trying to make sense of the clues scattered throughout the labyrinth. The looming stone walls, the cobwebs, the eerily silent atmosphere, each element seemed to hold a deeper meaning, a metaphor for something buried in Lily's, or perhaps even my own, subconscious. Soon, I found myself in front of the same wooden door. The beast's roar was at the cusp, resonating with my own heartbeat. But this time, there was a certain resolve as I pushed the door open and stepped into the mirrored room. In the murky reflections, Lily's face stared back at me again, her eyes hollow with terror. I looked at her, really looked at her, the lines of fear etched deep in her face. And then, in a moment of clarity that often punctuates the chaos of dreams, I understood, the mirrors were not just mirrors, they were windows into Lily's soul. Suddenly, a barrage of images flickered in the mirrors, Lily as a child, alone and afraid, a monstrous figure towering over her, the echo of its shouts matching the howl of the dream's beast, the labyrinthine layout of a house, dark and uninviting. I woke up, gasping for breath. The room was quiet, save for the pounding of my heart. The terrifying connection between Lily's dreams and her past reality became achingly clear. This was no mere nightmare, it was a horrifying past trying to break free from the recesses of suppressed memories. With daylight streaming into my room, I found a sense of purpose. I had seen what the nightmare was trying to convey, had experienced its terror firsthand. Now, I needed to help Lily confront it, to face the beast that had taken root in her psyche. This was no longer just about eating dreams, it was about healing old, festering wounds. I was no longer just a therapist, I had become a beacon guiding Lily out of her labyrinth of terror. As terrifying as the journey promised to be, I knew we had to embark on it, to confront the beast, to unlock the door, and to face what lay in the mirrored room of her soul. I met with Lily in my office later that day, the memory of the dream still fresh in my mind. She looked drained, the shadows under her eyes more pronounced than before. "Lily," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I believe your dreams, your nightmares, are more than just random constructions of your subconscious mind. I think they're memories." She looked at me, her eyes widening. "Memories," she echoed, a note of disbelief in her voice. "Yes," I nodded. "I think your dream is trying to tell us something about your past, something you might not consciously remember but has profoundly affected you." Her eyes filled with fear, but there was a glimmer of curiosity too. What do you think it is? I took a deep breath, weighing my words. The labyrinth, the monster, and the room full of mirrors. They all symbolize something from your past. The labyrinth could represent a place, perhaps your childhood home. The monster, maybe it stands for a person who used to scare you. And the mirrors, they could symbolize self-reflection, self-awareness. Lily was silent for a long time, her face pale. But then, she slowly nodded. You're right, Dr. Lawson. I grew up in a big old house. It was frightening. And my stepfather, he was a monstrous man. I nodded, offering her a small smile of encouragement. That's a good start, Lily. Acknowledging the source of the dream is the first step towards understanding it, and eventually, controlling it. In the weeks that followed, our sessions became a deep dive into Lily's past. Each detail she shared was another piece of the puzzle, another key to deciphering the nightmare. It was a difficult process, there were tears, moments of frustration, times when she wanted to give up. But, she persevered. And each night, I returned to the labyrinth, the knowledge from our sessions my guiding light. I walked its winding paths, stood in the mirrored room, confronted the beast. Each time, it felt a little less terrifying, a little more understandable. The journey was far from over. But, we were making progress, and for the first time in a long time, Lily's eyes started to lose their haunted look. She was no longer just a victim of her nightmares, she was becoming their master. As for me, I was learning too. Learning that being a dream eater was not just about consuming the terror of nightmares. It was about digesting it, understanding it, and turning it into something that could heal. We were navigating the labyrinth together, guided by our shared understanding, and there was a sense of hope that eventually, we would find our way out. Weeks turned into months, and the labyrinth only grew more daunting. Each session with Lily revealed more tangles in her troubled past, and the beast lurking in her nightmares only seemed to grow stronger. Despite all our efforts, it felt like we were losing ground. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I sat in my office, the patter of rain against the window doing little to alleviate the heaviness in the room. Across from me, Lily was a mere shadow of the woman she had been when we started. The vibrancy in her eyes was replaced by an unbearable emptiness. Lily, I began, my voice filled with concern, we're still battling the beast. You're strong, but it feels like something is missing, a puzzle piece that's hiding in plain sight. She merely nodded, her hollow eyes meeting mine. It feels endless, Dr. Lawson, she said, her voice trembling, like I'm trapped in this nightmarish cycle with no escape. That night, when I ventured into the dream labyrinth, it seemed more foreboding than ever. The beast roared louder, its sound echoing off the stone walls. Inside the room of mirrors, Lily's terrified reflection met my gaze. Then, in the flickering light, a monstrous figure loomed behind her. But instead of standing her ground, she retreated, her fear taking over. When I awoke, I was unsettled. There was something about the dream, the hopelessness in Lily's eyes, that filled me with dread. A few days later, I received the tragic news. Lily was gone. She had succumbed to her nightmares, choosing to escape the only way she felt she could. She had left me a note, thanking me for trying to guide her through the labyrinth but apologizing for not being strong enough to make it through. I was shattered. I had walked with her through the horrifying maze, had tasted her nightmares, had tried to guide her to a way out. But in the end, it wasn't enough. I had failed her. The weight of guilt was immense, like a beast of its own gnawing at me. The labyrinth had claimed Lily, the monstrous embodiment of her fears taking her from the world of the waking. Her loss was a stark, painful reminder of the depth of despair that the human mind can harbor. I was left with the haunting echoes of the labyrinth, of the monster, of Lily's terrified face in the mirrors. As a dream eater, I had thought I could navigate the horrors of the subconscious. I thought I could guide my patients through their nightmares. But Lily's loss was a grim reminder of the consequences of my failure. The labyrinth, once a symbol of a psychological journey, was now a haunting reminder of a life lost. It marked a grim chapter in my journey as a dream eater. As I ventured on, I knew I carried not only the weight of my guilt but also the responsibility of learning from my failures, of becoming a better guide for those lost in their nightmares.